Greetings, everyone. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a good day. We are inside today. A little bit different setup for me. Same shirt, different day, new lesson. You can bet on that. But just wanted to say hello and how are you? And before we start our lesson today, I have a special message from my kids. So before we start, here we go. Here's a little something from my kids.
Um, a very happy Thursday to you. Happy birthday to you. Parents say happy birthday to you. Don't you like my whale shirt? Is it my turn? Yes. I don't know what I was. I gotta say what that said.
Please say your name.
Have a very, very happy birthday. Frank, it's your turn. Happy very, very first day.
I hope you enjoyed that little welcome from my kids. And now it's time to get started with our lesson. Today's lesson will be Lesson B on page 112. Again, we're in Unit 9, and we'll be starting Lesson B on page 112 today. And today we're going to talk about conditionals, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but we're going to talk first about conditionals, and we're going to look specifically or focus in on the present unreal. So today we're going to talk about conditionals and the present unreal. As I was preparing for today's lesson, I remembered how in the past this lesson is filled with a whole lot of confusing. And what I mean by that is it's just a hard idea to get our heads around, to understand, to comprehend. And there are just a lot of little pieces that don't really make sense that come together to form this thing called the present unreal. So I'm going to go slow and try to explain it the best that I can, so that we can get a good understanding of what we're talking about, and so that you will be ready to go use present unreal conditionals, whatever that means. Just for comfort, we don't use that word hardly ever. Until I started teaching ESL, I had never used that word. So growing up in grammar school, we did not use that. So don't feel bad. It's not important that you remember, but what is important is just remembering how to make these, and so you understand what you are communicating. So let us start by talking about conditionals. What are conditionals? The first thing you can think about is you may think about if then sentences. If I drink lots of coffee at night, I will stay up late, right? If then. A lot of times it is first one sentence, one action, followed by a second action. But for the second action to happen, the first action must happen first. So the second action depends on the first action. If the first action does not happen, then the second action will not happen. So you could need to add, for a conditional, first action must happen for the second action to happen. So the two actions are related, they are connected, right? The first for conditional, the first action happens, and because the first action happens, then the second one will happen, right? But it's not the same as this happens because this happens, then this happens, right? For conditional, if we add the if, and the if says maybe. Only if this happens, or maybe if this happens, then this will happen, right? For instance, maybe the coronavirus maybe will last until the new year, right? We do not know for certain. It's a possibility, right? So if we could replace maybe with if the coronavirus lasts until the new year, so it's a maybe, we don't know. And we would then say then, so what might happen because if the first action happens, the maybe happens. Maybe it happens. If it does happen, then many people will suffer, will go through hard things, right? So it's not, when we use if, it's a maybe. This might happen, it might not happen, or if this has not, with if, it has not, maybe it has not happened yet, but if it does, then this will happen, right? So maybe a whole lot more of my confusing you, but for conditionals, if means maybe something will happen, or if it does happen, then this will be the effect, or what happens because of the first action, right? So in conditionals, there's a possibility. It is not for certain. Basic idea. We're going to, over the next 2 units, we're going to understand conditionals a little bit better, a little more, have more detail to that. But the big idea for conditionals is this maybe action. If this happens, it has not happened for sure. If it does happen, then this will be the effect, right? And I'll give you some more examples of this later, but first, starting here, this is our initial big picture idea of conditionals. So let's talk about, we're talking about conditionals, present unreal conditionals. So talking about conditionals, now let's focus on the present unreal. All right, you know me, and I like to talk about my prefixes. And our second word has a prefix un, right? We're going to ignore the present. Present talks about the tense, the time of the verb, but we'll come back to that later. But we're going to skip to the second part, the unreal. If you remember, un means not. So unreal means not real. But we're not thinking about unreal in the terms of fake. So when we say unreal, we're not saying fake, okay? So present unreal does not mean fake in this case. But what we're talking about is more in the sense of by unreal. By unreal, what I mean is it's like an idea or something that imaginary, if I could spell imaginary correctly, or maybe in the world of possibility. by idea, I mean it hasn't happened yet. It's something maybe we think in our head, but it has not actually happened into the real world. Imaginary, um, it's again related to an idea. It's something we have thought about, thought of, an idea we have created in our mind that, um, but it has not come to happen yet. It hasn't happened yet. The world of possibility. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen, but it's possible to happen, but not real. Another way of thinking about it would be, what would happen in an ideal world? What do I mean by ideal world? Ideal world would be something, a real world, or not, excuse me, not a real world. Ideal world would be the best possible world, right? Um, an ideal world would be if there were no problems, if there was nothing wrong, that would be an ideal world. Okay, so if you think about when we're talking about the present unreal, we're thinking about things that would maybe happen in the ideal world, the best possible world. Things in the ideal world, the best world, are maybe not possible here, but things that we want to happen. Have I lost you yet? Okay, so when we're talking about the unreal, these are ideas or possibilities or things we want it to be true, but maybe cannot come true in our world or not able to come true. Now that I've given you this big picture explanation, this idea, this hard idea to understand, let's actually look at a couple examples to help us to get a better idea, a better understanding of what I'm talking about with the present unreal conditional. All right, here's our example sentence. If everyone drove smaller cars, we would use less gasoline. Okay, so which part is the conditional? Let's be clear about that. It's the if we could if everyone drove smaller cars. Now, here's where this is what makes it unreal. Think about it. If everyone drove smaller cars, is this a possibility? Is it possible, or is it likely that is it likely that everyone in the world would start driving smaller cars? We live in Texas. Think about Texas. Think about the cars you see on the streets and the cars you see on the highway. Do you think, and living in Texas, do you think it's possible that everyone would start driving smaller cars? In Texas, there is a saying that everything in Texas is bigger. We like things big. We like our trucks to be big, right? We also live in America, where we say, I like my freedom. You cannot tell me what to do. We see that a lot happening right now. The people do not want to be told what to do, right? People in America would say, you cannot tell me what size car to drive. I want my big truck, especially in Texas. You cannot tell me to drive small car. I need my big truck. I live in Texas. I live in the city of Dallas. I need a big truck, right? So it's not possible to say that to make everyone drive smaller cars. So that's not really possible. But in an ideal world, in the best world, if everyone did drive smaller cars, then what would happen? What would be the effect of everyone driving smaller cars? We would use less gasoline. Okay? So this is where the unreal, right? This is in the best world. If we could make everyone drive smaller cars, we would use less gasoline. Let's look at another example. I came up with this example earlier, and the best word I could come up with at the time was defeat, but I want to change it to eliminate. Here's another example. If people stayed home, we would eliminate the COVID-19 virus. This is a very real statement that applies to us today, right? This has real world implications, right? Again, is it likely, is it possible that everyone would stay home? Let me first say, this is our conditional. If people stayed home. Is it possible, is it likely, is it something that is very likely to happen that everyone would stay home? Think about what's happening today. Think about as you look around the community, is it possible for everyone to stay home? Can everyone stay home? No. If you think about it, like there are people that unfortunately have to go to work. They cannot stay home, right? Doctors, nurses, the police, fire and ambulance, grocery stores, right? Gas stations. Without those people, it would be, our country would look very different. It would just be totally different, right? But it's not possible for everyone to stay home. But in an ideal world, in the best world, if this did happen, what would be the result? What would be the effect? Well, we would eliminate the COVID-19 virus probably very quickly. So it's not so this is why these are two examples of the present unreal. Why is it unreal? Because it's not really possible. It's not really likely that this situation would happen, right? For everyone to drive small cars, for everyone to stay home, right? They're not likely situations to come true. But in an ideal world, in a perfect world, maybe they would, and this would be the result. So this is why I use the word imaginary, or the world of possibilities, right? In a world where maybe this would happen, this would be the effect. But in the world that we live, this is not really possible. And so that's why we call it unreal. Okay, so here are two examples. I'm going to add one more. Just to help demonstrate the unrealness. Okay, and then maybe this one will make even more sense about the best world, the ideal world, right? So what is our conditional part? It's the if clause. If the virus went away today, right? You can check the news. The virus has not gone away. So this is not a reality. This is not true. But in the best world, in an ideal world, or in the world of possibilities, if this were to happen, then this would be the result. But this is not going to happen. We want it to happen, but it's not. So this is why, again, why it's called unreal. It's something maybe we want to happen, but it can't happen because of the world we live in. We can't snap our fingers and make the virus go away. But we want this to happen. We want it to go away today, and then we could come back to school. But it's not possible. It's not real. It's not a real possibility. It's not a real situation. It's one we want. It's an idea or an ideal, the best situation, but it's not really possible in the world in which we live. And so that's why we call it unreal. Okay, now I hope the present unreal makes a little more sense. Um, and here's the next part that is confusing. We call it so we've been focusing on the unreal part. Now we're going to talk about the present part. And this is where it continues to get confusing. You would think, now that we're to the verb, we're going to talk about the verbs. Now that we're to the verbs, oh, smooth sailing, it's going to be easy, right? I am sorry, it's not going to be any more clear. It's not going to be any less confusing because even though we're talking about the present, the verb, none of the verbs are in the present. Let's look. All right, so in our conditional clause, the if clause, let's find our verb. If everyone drove smaller cars, I'm reading backwards, so that's why I'm having a hard time. So if everyone drove smaller cars, drove is our verb. Well, what tense is drove? Let me think. I drive to the store. I will drive. I drove yesterday. I have driven the car many times. It's the past. Oh dear. All right. So in our there's the first. Do a different color. I'm going to prepare myself a little better this time by not putting the caps back on my markers. All right. Let's look at our effect clause, the then clause. So in the conditional and the if, in my first sentence, it's in the past. All right. Let's look at this, find the verb in the second clause. We would use less gasoline. Okay. Well, use is a verb, but then we have this would. So in the effect or the then clause, our verb is going to be would plus the simple, you probably can't read that, but the simple present. Just so that you can see the simple present. Okay, is this true of all of them? Well, let's look. Let's look in the conditional clause of my next sentence. If people stayed home, we would eliminate the COVID-19 virus. Right, so conditional clause, if people stayed home, what is my verb? It is stayed. Again, that is the past. And then in my then or effect clause, we would eliminate. Eliminate is my main verb, and would eliminate. So it's would plus the simple present verb, would eliminate. And then if the virus went away today, my conditional clause, went. Okay, went. Present form is go, went, gone. Go, went, gone. Gone is the past participle, so went is the simple past. And then if we look at the effect clause, the then clause, we would return to school next week. My verb would be would return. The would plus the simple present. So just to write it out for you so that you have the formula. I would have if then plus verb just kidding. Have verb plus, if plus past verb, and then we would have in our next sentence would plus simple present verb. If plus, move that a little closer. For the conditional clause, the if clause, if plus the past tense verb, and then in the effect clause or the then clause, would plus the simple present verb. Okay? So, for those of you looking in our book, you might have noticed, and this is something important, two things I want you to point out. We're not using the word then. We're not using that. We're leaving that out. But I do want to point out that, let's look, there's a different way we can write this. We can actually start with the second clause, the then clause. We could say we would use less gasoline if everyone drove smaller cars. So, you can write it either way. You can start with the conditional clause, if everyone drove smaller cars. Then the effect clause, we would use less gasoline. Or you could start with the effect, which would be we would use less gasoline, and then the cause if everyone drove smaller cars. Okay? So just take that in for a second. So there's two different ways of writing them. Both the correct, probably you would use them depending on what you're trying to say and what your emphasis is. Whatever you want to emphasize more, whatever point you want to hit harder, you would put first. Notice in the second one, if the effect, the result clause comes second, no comma. Well, comma only if when if the conditional clause comes first. Okay. So one other thing is could and would. So we're going to use both. We use them for different meanings. Okay, if you ran into the street, you would get hit by a car. If you ran into the street, you could get hit by the car. And I'll underline would and could. All right, think about that for a second. Think about what the the way we use it differently is based upon what the meaning. So what do you think might be the difference in meaning? Go ahead and think about that for a second. Okay. So how do we know when to use would and could? So we would use would when we are 100% sure something would happen. Right? So here, if you ran into the street, you are guaranteed it will happen that you would get hit by the car. Now, unless you live on a street where there cars are constantly going by, there are cars every few feet constantly going by, it's probably not likely that you're going to get hit by a car. So we use could when it's a possibility, when we're less sure of something, right? So if you ran into the street, maybe you would get hit by the car, maybe you would not get hit by the car, right? It's a possibility. It's not a guarantee. It will not for sure happen if you ran into the street, right? It's a possibility. It's not a guaranteed thing, right? Here's another example. Wrong marker. So here's another example, an example that is important to us, relevant for us. If you did not wash your hands after going to the store, you would, again, here's our would, you would get sick from the virus. Or we could say, if you did not wash your hands after going to the store, you could get the virus. And that's assuming this situation happens while we are in this pandemic, right? So in this one, in the first example, it's 100% sure that if you did not wash your hands after going to the store, you would get the virus, right? It means this, if this happens, then this will happen, right? This would happen. It's a guarantee, it's a promise. But if you think about it, we don't know for sure. There are so many variables. There's so many possibilities. Like you could, no one who is sick could have gone to that store today and you would have been perfectly fine, right? So we would use, if you did not wash your hands after going to the store, you could get sick with a virus, right? So we're less sure. It's a possibility. It's not a guarantee. It's not a promise. It's likely, but we're not sure, right? So we would use could, right? If you touch your eye, your nose, your mouth, you could get the virus. You could get sick, but there's a lot of things that would affect that, right? Have you been out? Have you been around people who have been sick? Have you touched a lot of things, right? So it's not a guarantee. So we say could. We would, if we're not sure, if it's just one possibility of many, we would say could. But if it's a guarantee, a promise, we are 100% sure that this action will follow this action, we would say would, right? If I work at a factory, if I worked at a factory for 2 weeks, I would get paid, right? That's a guarantee. I work, I get paid. If I worked only part-time, I could lose my job, right? It's a possibility. So let me write this just so that we're clear. We use would when we're 100% sure. I forgot the sure part. And we use could when we are less sure. Okay? Right, so what I want you to do is the assignment on page 112, part A, where it says A, to practice, where it says A, write, complete the sentences, use the present unreal conditional. So remember, to make the present unreal conditional, we use if, the verb in the past tense, and then in the effect clause, the then clause, we would say would or could plus the verb in the simple present. So let's look at number 1 together and look at the answer. Number 1 says, many people put their newspapers in the trash can. If everybody blanked newspapers, we blanked millions of trees. All right. So if everybody blanked newspapers, this is our conditional clause. So what are we going to use? We're going to use the simple past. So we're going to say recycled, because we're talking about the simple past. We're talking about our conditional clause, the if clause. All right, so what would happen? What happens if people recycle newspapers? It's a guarantee that we are 100% sure we would save millions of trees, right? Because if we do this, then this will be the effect, right? And the verb, the recycle and save are verbs they give you under the blanks, okay? So what I want you to do, I want you to practice 2 through 6, and I want you to do that in a moment. Let me back up. So what I want you to do is I want you to practice that. So in a moment, I want you to pause the video, complete that, and then come back and listen to the rest of the video, because I'm going to play for you the answers, a recording of the answers being read, and then I want you to check your answers. And then after that, in our next video, I will go over the answers with you, and then we'll continue to review and practice our present unreal conditionals. So right now, what I want you to do is pause the video, answer the questions. After you've answered the questions, come back, listen to the recording, and check your answers, and then I'll have a final message for you. All right, go ahead and pause the video.
Page 112, Exercise 2A. 1. Many people put their newspapers in the trash can. If everybody recycled newspapers, we would save millions of trees. 2.
Noah never takes his car in for a tune-up. Noah's car would use less gas if he tuned up his car regularly.
3. Mr. Brown drives his own car to his job downtown. I think Mr. Brown could save money on gas if he carpooled to work. 4.
Many items in the supermarket are packaged in plastic. If you bought products that are packaged with recycled paper, you would help to reduce global warming.
5. Jessica always stays in the shower for a very long time. If Jessica took shorter showers, she would save water. 6.
Some kinds of fish contain large amounts of lead, a poisonous metal. I think you could be healthier if you stopped eating fish that contains lead.
Great work today, class. I hope this is helpful and not super confusing, but if it is, we'll continue and we'll practice again in our next video. I hope you're well. I would love to hear about some of the things you're doing, how you are doing. Feel free to text me. You don't have to text in the big class text thread, but feel free to text me or WhatsApp me just how you're doing and what are you doing. For me, I am spending a lot of time with my kids. We're playing, cooking, going on walks, playing outside. So I end up spending a lot of time hanging out with them, and maybe not so much time teaching English, but I think that time is well spent with them. But I also enjoy this time with you and getting able to share and continue to teach this with you, and I hope it is being beneficial. So I'd love to hear what you're doing. Shoot me a text or a WhatsApp message. Hope you're well, and we'll talk again soon. See you later. Bye-bye.